Hello, everybody. I'm very excited for today's guest, Joel Greene. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for giving me some of your time today. As I was mentioning to you, this conversation is a long time coming, like a long time coming. And this morning, we're going to kind of veer away from what I've been talking about a lot lately on the podcast in regards to like hormones and therapy there, and back to, I suppose, my roots, which is weight loss and maintaining weight is a big
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
So before we get into the conversation, um, I'm going to give you a little intro because this morning I was saying to my son, "Oh my God, I have the best guest on today. It's Joel Greene." And he was like, "Who's that?" And I was like, "Well, you'd only know it if you were in certain health circles, put it like
Yeah.
that."
Totally. I know. It's weird. It's weird being like, yeah, it's a weird thing. It's certain circles are like, oh my God. And then other circles is like, real.
I know it's when I have other guests on and I'm like, "Do you know who so and so is?" And people are like, "No." I'm like, "How do you not know these people?"
It's
But
so funny.
anyway, by the end of this, everyone's gonna love you. So, Joel Greene, I came across your work years ago, and you have quite the bio. But to jump straight in, you are the creator of the VEEP Nutrition System, which is the world's first commercially available program based on targeting the gut to affect biomarkers. And you've also been featured everywhere at this stage. Speaking in guest publications like Muscle and Fitness. You're also the author of The Immunity Code, which I have read and listened to maybe 7 times so far. You also were the first one to write an article on gut health and the microbiome back in 2007, which seems like forever ago, but it wasn't really. And you've also been featured on the Dr. Phil show, and you really have quite the repertoire, and people who don't know you are going to get to know you right now. So, Joel, before we get into the questions, most people know about my weight loss story, and now you do. Can you share a bit about your weight story before we get into the nitty-gritty?
Yeah, so really quick, I was always into fitness from the time I was 5 and fitness and athletics, and it was just always part of my life. So, I was always pretty fit until I would say probably what happened to me was in the early 90s, I started doing a meal replacement. That was the history of fitness is sort of these markers of new products coming out and everybody kind of in a
Oh,
big
yeah.
tribe of lemmings jumping on that bandwagon and
Mhm.
it to this day it's going strong. So you'll you'll see like the lemming movement for like keto. Oh, we got to do keto, and then it's carnivore. We got to do carnivore, and then it's acromantia. We need acromantia, and it's just like this crowd of lemmings. And so back in the early 90s, the big innovation was meal replacements, and there was one that came out called Metrex, and it was innovative for a lot of reasons. So I just read an article by a guy named Jeff Everson that said he was only eating one meal a day. He was doing OMAD, and then he was doing Metrex, and I'm like, oh, that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
And I got absolutely ripped on that. And my body fat percentage was so low. People were just like, my gosh, what's your secret? And
Mhm.
and anyways. So that worked. A lot of things we'll talk about today, you'll find are pretty typical of many stories. So I was I'd never really I'd always been pretty lean and fit, but based on that, I got ridiculously lean and fit. I was just ripped for about 5 years, and for about 5 years, that's kind of how I ate. I didn't really um, I just didn't really deviate. I was very disciplined. And then, long story short, a bunch of changes happened probably about 5 years in where I just cravings hit me and I started eating and all of these things we'll
But
talk
didn't you
about
change
today.
job as well at that stage?
Well, what happened was I kind of went on this journey until about 2003 of doing different diets, just trying to figure out what happened. So I did everything. I did whole, fresh, raw. I did calorie and macro counting. I did, kind of maybe what you'd call paleo. I did all this different stuff. And long story short, I would gain weight, lose weight, gain weight, lose weight. And then I went into a job in 2003, and that was about a 3-year stint of working in a startup where anybody who's familiar with startups knows you work all the time. And so I went to work for a startup. I wound up running that company. I was working crazy hours, and I was turning 40 about that time. And for the first time in my life, I got super fat. So I was working out, like I was huge, like muscles and
Mm.
big, and bench pressing and big chest, big arms, big gut. And but I was also fat. So I was like 260 pounds. And the juxtaposition was when I started that job, I was 212 pounds, ripped abs, like just super fit. And I went from super fit to super fat, but kind of like a gym fat, like more muscle than I'd ever had in my entire life, but also more fat. And basically the differentiator was that I was not in the fitness ecosystem. I was in the real world ecosystem of what everybody deals with, which is your life doesn't revolve around being fit, and then you get home and you're tired and you got kids and so, long story short, that for me changed my life because the formula I had been given didn't work. It didn't work in real life, and I was kind of basically had gone through about 10 years of weight rebounding, and so that set me on a course that led to where I'm at today, and all that we'll talk about today. So, but that was basically my story.
Hmm.
So,
That's it. Like I'm glad you pointed out, or I reminded you that you changed jobs. Is that a lot of people look at influencers and they look at me and they're like, "Oh, I want what she has. I want her secret. I want the secret sauce." And they look at the influencers and like, "I want that butt. I want that body. All of this." And I'm always open. I'm like, let's just make things clear. This is my job. This is what
yeah,
I
totally.
do. I own
Yep.
my own business. I have the flexibility to spend a few hours in the gym, not every day, but a lot more than the average person. You have to consider that when you're looking at these people that we would idolize and we want to be like, that's what they're doing all day, every day. And that's why they look a certain way. And that's why it's easier for them to maintain or get the abs or whatever. As soon as you step foot into a real life scenario, then it's like, oh shit, this is reality now. How do I navigate this? Like, I think if I ever stopped working for myself and went back to working for the man, 9 to 5, how would I navigate that? Like, I'd have to get up earlier because I probably wouldn't do it in the evening. Then I'm going to have to allocate time at the weekends. Like, it would be a challenge. Now, I believe it can be done as you do when you're not like an influencer or a personal trainer, whatever. It can be done to achieve the body and the health that you want, but you also have to be aware that your lifestyle is not the same as someone in the fitness industry, and that some people have never ever considered that. They detach the person from their lifestyle. So one of the obstacles that you've spoke about before is this. It's what is one of the biggest challenges for most people when they're trying to lose weight? Well, it's time restraints.
Yeah. 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 It's so basically what we're talking about is fantasy. I call it fitness fantasy. And the everybody's always asking, the big question always is, what's your secret? What's your secret? And the real secret is time. It's about 2 hours a day. And then the other part of that secret usually is drugs. So when you combine a bunch of drugs and a bunch of time, you're going to look a certain way. Okay. That has no bearing on any reality most people live in or would want to live in. That's just complete fantasy. It's not real. And I have over because I have many decades doing this, I have had many occasions where I've seen people that were on the cover of magazines, fitness models, who, for one reason or another, got out of it and got a real job, and they didn't have any answers either. Okay, once you took away the key variable, which was time, and then put them in a real world situation, they look just like everybody else. And
Mm-hmm.
when I asked them, I'd go, what's going on, man? Why? And the answer would be, I just don't have the time. I just don't have the time. So that I went through that personally, working in a real life hectic long hour kind of startup. I went through that, and what changed for me when I came out of that was realizing like we need a realistic treatment of what really happens in the real world because we're not dealing with truth. Like if we get real and we go, what's really true? What's the truth? The truth is that most people don't get paid to be fit, versus you have an industry where not all, but many, if not most, fitness influencers have never had a real job.
Yeah,
Never had a real job.
I
Never had
have
a real
had a
job.
real job.
And so they literally do not understand what that is like. They don't, so they give advice from this place of, no, it's just discipline. You got to make the time. You got to do all. They've never been in a situation where the man working for the man creates this pressure and these constraints for your time. Like, you'll show up on a Monday morning and you've got all these plans and you have a four-alarm fire series of emails and voicemails, and we need to get together and meet and solve this problem. And there goes your whole day. And that's real common. So, what changed for me after that period was I realized that something was missing. And the thing that was missing was a foundation that no matter what the season, what the gig, what the job, you could always do.
Mhm.
That's the thing that was missing. And the purpose of that foundation was really three things. Number one, it was to keep the body mobile and flexible because what happens with age is we get stiff. Youth is mobility, pliability, flexibility. Age is stiffness, easily injured from quick turning, and so that was one. The other was to keep the body from accelerated aging, aging faster, and to kind of go with that. And the other was to basically keep the cardiovascular system in shape. So those are the three things that really matter, really matter. And the problem with this age, which dates back to somewhere in the mid 50s when the ethos of what you do to stay healthy became popularized, all that came out of people who didn't work for a living. That came out of Venice Beach and that came out of like Santa Monica, where you had people doing gymnastics on the beach who didn't really have real jobs, and then out of that came the modern era of bodybuilding, which has no bearing on any reality anybody lives in. And so all of this stuff, which is sort of an ethos of appearance first, how you look, that must be how healthy you are,
Mhm.
became sort of the dominant ethos. And that's a time intensive, drug intensive ethos. It doesn't work in real life for most people.
Mhm.
Whereas something that could work, that does work, that's worked for me, that's worked for thousands of people, is creating a new and different foundation that's based on literally the same amount of time it takes to brush your teeth every day. And so there's a prioritization of things like mobility. Like if I only had 1 minute today and that's all I had, what would be my highest priority? Okay, for me, it's my flexibility and mobility. And then number two is my cardiovascular system. Okay. And then number three is just doing simple, basic things to age a little bit slower. And so when you take those three things and you create this foundation that's non-time intensive, that's what's missing. That's what's missing for most people. And the other thing that's missing is truth.
Mhm.
So this is never going to work until you step out of fantasy and step into truth. The truth is the vast majority of people are going to have very long periods of their life where they have zero time to work out. Zero
Mhm.
time. Zero. And I've lived that many decades where I had a season in 2011 where I was trying to get my nutrition software launched and I had funded it myself and I brought in some financing and I ran out of money and the financiers pulled back and I had to go take consulting gigs in different parts of the country. And I was working so many crazy hours. Like I literally either lived on a plane or lived out of a suitcase, and I had zero time to work out. So anything I did just had to be in between, going to the bathroom and getting dinner, like push-ups and stuff.
Mhm.
And those seasons are inevitable for most people. Most people are going to have seasons where just everything comes together in such a way that it nets out to you saying one phrase, which is, yeah, I got to get back into it. I'm out of it.
Got to get back on track.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's the truth. That's the truth. And once you take that as the truth, you'll come into how to handle what's really happening, which is during those seasons, weight gain is almost inevitable. Like you have to just expect, like it's impossible to do what the fitness fantasy says. You're probably going to gain 3, 4, 5 pounds. But if you have a strategy that's built on real life, you can mitigate the weight gain. And then you're going to always have periods where time opens up later and you can be a little more intensive on dropping body fat. So
Yeah. Your one thing you mentioned there was the inflammation, and inflammation is something I focus on a lot. And you were, I think it was you, the first person that I ever heard discuss the concept of inflammaging. And
mhm.
when you said that, it just was a light bulb moment for me. And I took it that if I could control inflammation on every level, even down to my blood, I could slow down
Yeah.
aging. And like you mentioned before, you were surprised when I told you what age I was, and I have an almost 21-year-old son. And I
Yeah,
swear,
that was like, what?
well, I swear a lot of your work has influenced how I look, and the concept of inflammaging was a huge factor. And now it really is the basis of my teaching, as I'm sure you'll agree. Most of our issues and diseases, they start out because there's an inflammatory factor there. So if you can control inflammation, you can really, really, I suppose, slow down time if you do it correct.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a key concept in the first chapter of my first book, which was inflammaging. And it's the idea that over time with age, literally the blood itself becomes an inflammatory medium. So everywhere the blood's going, it's carrying inflammation with it. And it's very difficult to age well when you are everything's inflamed. And the thing to understand about inflammation is that you cannot understand it apart from the immune system because inflammation is a critical component under the umbrella of the immune system. If you get injured, there's what we call the onset phase, okay, where everything gets inflamed. That's the recruitment phase. That's where the site of the injury is recruiting proteins and collagens and immune cells. Then there's the resolution phase where you clear all that out, the injury heals, the scar heals up, whatever it is we're talking about. The problem with aging is the whole body becomes like a giant injury where the resolution phase never happens. And then
Mhm.
that affects everything. It affects your ability to recover from exercise. It affects the rate at which the whole system as a whole is declining. It affects absolutely everything. And there are very specific components that if we were to say, just, get out a whiteboard and go, oh, how do we fix this then? We could actually create a one, two, three, sort of list of things as we age and just start to cross those things off. Like, oh, well, we're getting more senolytic cells, so we got to get rid of those. And then the blood seems to be more inflammatory, so we have to fix that. Our body fat's inflamed. How do we fix that? And so you can create kind of a checklist of check boxes that is surprisingly easier than you might think to fix. And then that becomes not a panacea, but it does become, let's say, like a 20% improvement overall. And
Mhm.
then you can stack other little improvements, 5% here, 10% there, 5% there. And so suddenly what you have is a series of things that don't take any time that are solving 50, 60, 70% of the problem. We can never totally solve the problem, but we can sure as heck make a big dent in it. So
We can stack conditions in our favor.
mhm.
It's just like you said, it's not that hard. I don't think it's that hard, and it's easy for me to say that I've done it and kept it off, and I have experience compared to the average woman. But I don't think it's that hard as long as you have a good roadmap. The hardest part is then actually doing it. Just like anything, it's like you actually have to do it. You can't just do it for a week and expect miracles. You have to do it. But with the inflammation aspect on the fat cells, how does that affect our ability to lose weight? If you have severe systemic inflammation, how is that going to affect you? And your metabolic rate, of course.
Well, so you said something really key. You said if you have a roadmap. Um, the problem is, up until really very recently, anything close to the right roadmap didn't exist. It was based on fantasy. It was based on, you got to put in the time, go to the gym, all this. But it was just like meatheadology. When you start to break down this problem and you come up with like your checklist, at the top of the list is body fat or adipose tissue, not so much as a storage organ, but more as a control system for the rest of the body. And since I got into this game full time back in 2006, there's been this evolution of the collective understanding of what exactly body fat is. Like I remember talking to fitness guys back in 2006, and they would say things like, "Man, body fat's just stored energy," and nothing could be a billion miles more from the truth than that. So when we look at the various organ systems in the body and we ask the question like, what about inflammation? How do we fix that problem? You literally have to start with the gut and body fat because they're connected. And the problem that everybody's going to run into for the most part, especially in this age, is that body fat, once it gets inflamed, it becomes, I guess the analogy would be, it's like a boat where the bow of the ship is tipping under the water. It affects the entire ship. And so
Mhm.
body fat is, you can think of body fat as an immunocontrol mechanism, meaning that the way that inflammation works in body fat, it attracts immune cells, inflammatory immune cells, and a lot of other things. And then body fat is a signal organ, so it puts signals out to the other organs in the body, particularly muscle and particularly the organs. And what happens is, as body fat goes, the rest of the body goes. So when body fat's inflamed, you're going to start to see what's called the SASP, or secretory associated senescent phenotype. It's basically the profile of old age. It starts to creep across the entire body once body fat gets inflamed.
Mhm.
So all that to say, to solve that problem, you have to start first by recolonizing the gut towards a youthful profile, because what that does is it takes the gut junctions and it seals them up. And that prevents bad guys from poking through the gut lining into the bloodstream and going to body fat where they inflame the body, create insulin resistance.
Mhm.
So first by recolonizing the gut, and then by having sort of a strategy for body fat that goes beyond just calories, you can create super non-time intensive ways to keep your body fat from being inflamed. One example would be you have what I call the amplified fast. It's a short fast, 3 days a week. And one of the things you insert into that fast are a few compounds that de-inflame body fat. So top of the list would be alpha ketoglutarate, helps to lower inflammation in body fat. You could add what's called D-ribose, which is a sugar, helps to take immune cells in body fat and flips their phenotype towards the anti-inflammatory. And so very simple, very simple things like one, two, three, and just the fact that you're doing those on a regular basis, what you're doing is you're taking what would otherwise be a very high slope of probability towards aging the wrong direction. And with every one of those things you stack on, you're creating a much better set of odds to work
Mhm.
against. If that makes sense, and it's kind of long-winded, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, you're trying to level the playing field, basically.
Yes.
Um, it is a lot of people still think that body fat is only a storage mechanism of calories. And if that was
Yeah.
the truth, it would make things incredibly easy.
Oh
Like if,
gosh, yeah.
like if
Yeah.
that's all it was, and I had to break down body fat and lose these calories, and that was it, okay, that's easy. But unfortunately, it's not. It's very common, especially with the movement more towards over the last few years of embrace bigger body sizes and love yourself no matter what size you are, which
Yeah.
is, yeah, I'm sure we have the same opinion. And women will come to me for help, and we'll be doing a consultation, and maybe they have 50, sometimes 100 pounds to lose, but they'll tell me, you know what, body weight's not really a thing for me. I don't really care about my size. I just want to feel
Oh,
better and have more. And I'm
yeah.
like trying to say to them in the nicest way possible. And remember, I'm Irish, so I struggle with stuff like that. I'm like, well, that's not possible. That's not possible because your body fat is influencing how you're actually feeling. You're basically rusting from the inside out, and that's affecting all of the symptoms. But people have it in their head. And don't get me wrong, there are some people that can be a bit heavier and have all great metabolic markers, but it's few. It's far and few. Like, come on. So people are still a bit confused. And of course, now we've got the entertainment industry and social media confusing them even more. Like, no, that's not correct. It's just not right. So yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to rewrite the laws of physics. I can kind of hear the Irish in you going, "Are you fucking daft, girl?"
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So here's the thing. Like when you look at the most common disease states. And you look at cardiovascular disease, you look at metabolic diseases like weight, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome. Those are all, every single one of them, 100% related to weight. So when people go from, being very heavy to being like kind of their ideal weight, they become asymptomatic in all of those things. So why is that? Why is it that if you just fix one variable, you fix weight, and you go from, let's say, being obese to being, ideal weight, all of those issues, all of the likelihood of disease states, all that stuff vanishes. It's because the vector that drives all that is body fat. That's
Mhm.
why. So, I've studied body fat for a number of decades here, and I mean, I've looked at it in a level of detail that I can't even really convey. It's so complex, but
Don't.
suffice to say that body fat is not body fat is a it's a programming system. That's what it is. It's a system for programming the rest of the body programmatically using mechanical tension and translating that into a second messaging system that programs cells, literally in the nucleus, programs genes, programs cells, and then those instructions spread out to the rest of the body. So you can think of it as a command center would be the best way to think about it.
Mhm.
And with that said, again, you mentioned the roadmap. There's some very critical things everybody has to know. Okay. And if you don't know these things, the analogy is what we have today in the fitness influencer sphere is you have a road, a health journey, and on that road, on the roadside, there's a bunch of Sherpas going, pick me, pick me, pick me. I know the map. I know the map. I know the map. But what you find in practice is none of them have ever been down the road. They don't actually know the map. They just think they do, but they don't. And so why that's important is there are very distinct junctures and turning points and forks in that road of the health journey regarding weight that if you don't know about them, almost inevitably you're going to take a wrong turn and go off a cliff. For example, we teach this in my coach's course. One of them is called first timer syndrome. Okay.
Mhm.
And first timer syndrome is a fact, it's a reality. It's that if you have never dropped weight before, that is your highest probability of long-term success, is that first time. Okay.
Mhm.
Like as a coach, if people come to, any one of our coaches and through a question set, they say, "Have you ever dropped weight before?" No, I really want to. The coach is like, "Yes," because they know they have the highest chance of the big before after picture, and it's going to stick. And what happens? This is never talked about in that health journey of weight. The more times that you go to the fat loss well in that journey, every time you do it, there's less and less probability of the result you want sticking.
Which
Okay.
is what we would call yo-yo dieting.
Yes, but the misconception with yo-yo dieting is that you always return to normal. You don't. What happens is that is never discussed, and it's part of the unreality or the fake sort of thing of fitness fantasy, is that when you're young, you can do a few weight loss journeys and the body rebounds pretty good. But there's always a tax on that. There's always a cost. That cost can actually be elucidated. We can actually write it out and go, nope, there's this, there's this, there's this. And what happens over time is that you are creating changes in the physical structure of your body fat every trip to the well that are making it less and less likely that the more you do it, the less likely it is to stick. In other words, what what multiple weight loss journeys are doing is programming in lifelong weight gain,
So that's at a
which is
physiological level we're speaking. We're
mm,
not speaking just it's not likely to stick because of your mindset or your
yeah,
mental health.
no,
This
has
is physiologically.
yeah, that's the big thing, and that's where um, I appreciate what you're doing here, and it makes me, happy that someone as young as you is really taking this to heart because there are so many. I see PhDs who want to garner the market in terms of, hey, listen to me, and they're preaching 70s bodybuilding. That's all they're preaching. They're like, what's your answer? Oh, you just got to get to the gym and cut calories. They're preaching 1970s style bodybuilding as the answer, and it's not. Like they
Mhm.
haven't even begun to get into what's really true.
Mhm.
So yeah, we're told things like, no, it's just discipline, it's just willpower, it's just you get lazy, blah blah. No, it's not. These are identifiable physiological changes in biology that are not motivation. This is biology that all basically reduce down to the body's adaptive self-defense against starvation,
Hmm.
and they are cumulative over time. And the way you know this is true is just go interview anybody in their 50s with a weight problem, and they're going to hear the exact same story every single time, which is, yeah, the first diet I did was X, whatever. It was, I did the Atkins diet, and it worked great. It worked so good, but then it didn't work after a while. So then, then I tried keto, and it worked, but kind of not worked, and and then I did this, and it didn't work at all, and now nothing works. And you
You
hear that
just
story
can't keep it off. Yeah.
all the time. Yeah. And the answer is yeah. So there's a fantasy roadmap in place. We need to get rid of that and put the reality roadmap in place. And the reality roadmap will help you prevent that if you know what to do. But that's the reality is that your biology is not hardwired to support your bikini. It's hardwired to support you not starving to death over multiple seasons of famine. And so it gets better and better and better at protecting its weight. That's the
Yeah.
truth.
Okay, so what I'm hearing here, first, let me just detach the Sherpa analogy. You're correct about the Sherpas. And what I think people also miss is a lot of these Sherpas, they might have lost 10, 15 pounds. They haven't lost massive amounts of weight, but also a lot of them started out slim as well. It's not like they started out heavy and then lost the weight. And with the first timer syndrome that you mentioned, maybe I've heard you mention it in the book, but I don't think I haven't. I've listened to a lot of your conversations and it clicked with me. Hold on. My weight loss, and I lost a massive amount of weight,
First
was
time.
my first time.
Yeah.
Now, over the years, I've maybe fluctuated like 5 pounds here or there for vacations, but I always kind of nip it in the bud. But another thing is with my first time, I started off with just the calories and the exercise and the portions and like the usual, the bodybuilder stuff. But then as time went on, I knew I needed to learn more. So then I started adding in your teachings and other teachings. And I really implement it. I do it. I practice what I preach. And that has helped me keep it off now for almost 20 years. And that's people are not like they're doing it. I suppose what we're trying to say is people who are trying to lose weight, especially first timers, they're taking a very basic, simplified approach to it, but they're not looking at the nuance, which is what we're discussing, and these little things that we can add in that can not only help you, but help you keep it off for longer, I think. Am I correct?
Yeah, let me kind of just give a simple bullet point list of what we're talking about here. So, high level, you've been given a fantasy map. It's not the road of your wellness journey. It's fantasy, and it's most of the people pitching it have never had a real job. So forget that map. Let me give you the real one. Okay, the real one is that the body over thousands and thousands of years, the human body, is only here because it's really good at protecting itself through seasons of famine. Okay, like it's really good at adapting to famine, which means it's really good at protecting its weight as a survival mechanism. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
So there are numerous biological mechanisms that kick in that are designed to do that. So basically, there is an identifiable pattern of weight regain that if you took a bell curve and you took 100 people and you put them all through, a weight loss program, no matter what it is, it could be any diet, it could be anything. If none of them have ever dropped weight before, your highest percentage of success will be all the people that have done it the first time. Okay. But what will happen is of those 100, roughly 80 will regain most, if not all the weight. 20 will be successful, 20% will be successful, but 80 will regain most, if not all the weight. And the reason is that post weight loss, numerous mechanisms kick in all at once that over a period of time drive weight regain as part of the adaptive survival mechanism we all have inside of us. And so then what happens is there is a collective cumulative effect of making it more difficult to drop weight. It is cumulative, meaning in the second go around, the third go around, the fourth go around, it's not as noticeable. But after multiple, so every time you drop fat, you are turning on a program that makes you regain the weight. And then over time, the actual physiological mechanisms involved, like fat cells, get resistant to dropping body fat. And it's physical. Like we can physically identify, oh wow, this body fat is getting fibrotic. Oh wow, the ECM is getting fibrotic. Oh wow, there's specific physical changes going on here. So that the most likely outcome for most people with, if you took 100 people, put them on a curve, the most likely outcome for 80 of them is repeated cycles of weight rebounding, accumulating, and they can't lose weight at all.
Mm.
Okay. So, so the first piece of that map that needs to be in there is something missing, and that's okay. Now that you've got to your ideal weight, we have a period here of 4 months to a year where you got to do specific things to prevent the weight rebound. That's what we have to do. Okay. And if you go look right now at all the data that's coming out on GLP-1 meds, what you see is weight regain is a prominent part of the picture for most of the people involved. Not all, but most. The difficult part with this for most people is that you can always find a success story like yourself. And so people think, oh, well, that's everybody. But it's not. It's actually you're in a very small minority here. If you took 100 people, very small.
This
And so
the statistics show that it's less than 5% of people keep the weight off long term. Like that's
yeah,
staggeringly low.
yeah, right. And that's so that doesn't get to motivation, that gets to biology. And what's missing is elucidating the biological mechanisms that are at work and then having a strategy to counter them. That is truth, and that's where the success comes from. So that big picture is what I would offer.
Yeah, like I really think it's it's doing the right things basically while not just focusing the calorie restriction aspect. You mentioned something there and I smiled when you did. I was like, "Yes, let's go there." The ECM,
Yeah,
extracellular matrix.
yeah.
I attribute to understanding this being a big part of my results and how I look and perform today. Tell us.
Yes. So the thing to understand is that your body fat is held in place by what amounts to a scaffolding system. It's called the extracellular matrix. And the truth is, all tissues in the body have this. They all have an extracellular matrix. But here's the thing that really has never been talked about until I wrote about it back in 2019. Um, the extracellular matrix is composed of very specific kinds of proteins and collagens and fibers, and they are different. Like when you lose weight and regain weight, the extracellular matrix has to break down. So the analogy is imagine that we were going to remodel your house, and what we have to do is move some rooms. We got to tear some walls down, and then we're going to build some walls back. The act of tearing down the walls, it can do a lot of damage.
It makes everything
And
unstable.
right. And then when we go to rebuild the walls, just imagine that we're not using the same types of building materials that were in the wall originally. We're loading in where we used wood before, now we're using steel. Okay. That's very much what happens in the body. So there's very specific types of collagen in the extracellular matrix that when it breaks down and then has to reshape and reform, very often a stiffer type of fiber, going from wood to steel is loaded into the ECM. Now, here's the part that's mind blowing. Those fibers are mini computers. They are a combination of a signal that it's like a cell phone tower and a computer combined.
Mhm.
So what they do is these fibers that are stiffer, they are inflammatory in nature. They are inflammatory fibers. So they act like a cell phone tower that's sending out, frequency. And if you're too close to it, you're getting inflamed, right?
Mhm.
The other thing they do is they program the fat cell. So they send signals back to the fat cell and to program all kinds of things, like the types of immune cells that are going to be around your fat, all kinds of things.
Mhm.
Now, in the now, if you're one of the lucky winners like yourself, where you go through a fat loss journey, you're young enough, and you stay on it, and then it sticks, you really don't see too much of this. But for 80% of people, roughly, what happens is when they regain the weight, they have changed the makeup. In other words, they've gone from wood to steel in the walls of the extracellular matrix. And imagine that those steel pillars that now make up the matrix, they also have transmitters in them. And so what happens is the fat becomes somewhat inflammatory. And the more you do it, the more the fibers change out from wood to steel, so to speak. And so eventually what happens is by the time you're like 50, the extracellular matrix is incredibly stiff. And one of the things is that it won't let go of fat cells. So you have fat cells adhering. And so once the ECM gets really stiff, in order to drop fat, the fat cell has to deform. They won't let it deform, literally.
So they make it harder to penetrate the fat cells.
They make it harder to release stored fat in the fat cells.
Mhm.
So when you're young and it's your first time, the fat cell can completely release all of its lipids and it can completely deflate. And then the ECM, it's like the difference of young people are very bendy and flexible. Old people are very stiff. Imagine that stiffness carries over to the fat itself. So once it gets stiff, it doesn't let go of fat. So these are very real things, and there's actually very real ways you can prevent this. One example, very simple, is in the post-fat loss phase, you want to do some mechanical massage. You want to get like a Theragun, for example,
Mhm.
and you just want to, you want to a few times a week massage mechanically your body fat where you've lost fat.
Mhm.
This has been shown in studies to change the kinds of immune cells that are recruited into body fat post-fat loss. So you go from the inflammatory kind to the anti-inflammatory kind. Just that little simple thing can
Mhm.
make a huge difference long term. And
Is
we're
this
still
though providing if you're doing some sort of tissue manipulation like that, is that also providing you're not then coming along and eating Wendy's 30 minutes later?
well, so that's another component. One of the post-fat loss issues is that you have this inversion of key hormones like leptin and ghrelin. So ghrelin's kind of your post-meal fullness, I'm full. Leptin's kind of your long-term sort of like, I'm just eating more of late. I don't know why. Okay. What happens post-fat loss is they invert from where they should be. You can literally predict weight regain from leptin ghrelin ratios.
Mhm.
Okay. So another part of this new strategy post fat loss is that in the post fat loss phase, we need very strategic meals in the morning, huge calorie meals, full of protein, full of carbs to trigger ghrelin, which is suppressed post fat loss, so that what's going on is post fat loss, your metabolism's lower because you've lost a lot of body fat, but your desire to eat is higher. Okay. And we need to renormalize that. So we need to get metabolism up. We need to get the drive to eat down. And so part of this component is that you are strategically inserting very specific meals in the morning where you have the greatest likelihood of burning tons of calories, specifically to counter the inversion of leptin and ghrelin. Okay. And so this is all part of getting us out of 70s bodybuilding, which didn't work for Arnold when he was governor. It didn't work for him. It's part of getting us out of that and into the modern era. And the really sad thing is like, I see people that, should be on the forefront of this. Like I see doctors, I see PhDs, and they're utterly clueless about this stuff. They even ridicule it,
Mhm.
and it's because they just don't know about it.
Yeah, there's still very tunnel vision aspect of just exercise physiology macros. But just going back to the extracellular matrix and the collagen aspect, where does glycine come in there? Because glycine being, of course, an amino acid in all collagens, but also keeping the fat cell soft and limber, shall we say, is glycine valuable for something like that?
Well, glycine, particularly with NAC, can reverse a number of the aspects of aging sort of globally, and it provides, kind of some of the collagen substrates that we need. So it's just it's sort of a broad spectrum beneficial thing to have in there. With respect to the specific types of collagen that you start to see in the post-fat loss phase, that's a more complex question, and that involves a lot of dials that we have
Mm.
to you have to reset the gut, you have to do, you have the mechanical massage, you have to do, a bunch of things to kind of make sure that you're going down the right road with that. But I would just say that as a broad spectrum thing, one of the benefits of glycine is that it just helps you stay lean, and so in the post-fat loss phase, it's certainly something to make sure is in the picture.
It's super anti-inflammatory as well. And like you meant, like the Glynac stack that people talk about, like it is really anti-inflammatory. You mentioned there about the whole bringing metabolism up, hunger down. In that context, which is, well, it can be a challenge for a lot of people, where do you think, and this always kind of humors me, where do you think muscle comes into this? Because there's so many people that misunderstand muscle in the context of fat loss. They're like, yeah, if you can put on a load of muscle, you're going to burn all these extra calories a day. No, you're
Yeah.
not. I have a shit ton of muscle and I get maybe an extra 50 calories a day. It's not like people think you get an extra 500 calories. The best bodybuilders in the world will also tell you that. No, you don't. It's not like you're getting this huge metabolic rev. If anything, having a lot of muscle is going to slow metabolic rate because it makes you tireder and then it makes you more hungry as well.
Well, that's a trope that is, I see doctors pushing this. I say, just when I hear that, it's like, okay, you don't know what you're talking about. You literally don't know what you're talking about. I mean,
And by the way, people, we're not saying you shouldn't have muscle. There's loads
yeah,
and loads of benefits from muscle. We're
right.
not saying that.
Yeah.
But in regards to metabolism, there's a truth.
Yeah, the trope is that all you need to do to burn your body fat is add muscle. Completely fake. Completely fake. Anybody that's telling you that is either it's just a shtick, and they know it's a shtick and they don't care, or they just don't know what they're talking about. But there's no third alternative. And look, I told you my story. The most muscle I ever had in my life was the fattest I ever was. Okay. Um, like muscle, first of all, the average person without steroids, you're going to find it very difficult to add 10 pounds of muscle. It's not that you can't, but it's going to be a long-term proposition. It's going to take a long time to do it. And generally speaking, in order to add the muscle, for most people, you have to over-calorize. You have to make sure
Eat
that you're
more.
in. Yeah, you have to eat more, and as a result of eating more, you just inadvertently will put on more fat. There's some tricks to that. There's some things I've put in my first book about ways you can trick the body. But generally speaking, when you have to eat more, you're going to put on a little bit more fat. The truth about that, metabolically speaking, is that the the nature or the quality or the makeup of your body fat can have a very large sway over how insulin works. And the reason these GLP-1 drugs work so well is they get insulin working the way it should. That's why. Okay, they get, apart from the hunger aspects, most people today are somewhat insulin resistant. And when you get insulin working correctly, you get that, oh, I can eat anything and not get fat body. Okay. So it's really more about insulin function than it is anything else. Like if insulin's working really, really well, you'll find that it's much easier to be lean. And adding muscle can help your insulin sensitivity. That's a great thing about it, but it's not like it's because you've added 5 pounds of muscle, now you're burning 5,000 more calories a day. It doesn't work like that.
If only. And back to what we were saying about the inflammation, though, muscle can help with inflammation. It can help reduce inflammation by releasing myokines, but also the GLPs, a big factor of them is they help people with inflammation as well. So circling back, like we're looking at when we're really approaching weight loss, we should be considering inflammation and the insulin as well. And another thing you mentioned there is about how fast you gain muscle. This always makes me giggle, but at the same time, I don't want to dishearten people. Like, go build some muscle, it's good for you, but you don't actually build as much muscle as you think in a short amount of time. Like, it takes a long time to build muscle, and it's very hard. And if I put on 5 pounds of muscle in a year, I would be very lucky. And like I'm an experienced trainer, it's not as fast as people think.
Yeah, it can be easy to do. Like there's a trick in my first book, which is you starve yourself for roughly about a week, okay? Or you go into a starvation mimicking diet, and then you slam into over calorizing for about 10 to 12 days, okay? And you train heavy, and you'll put more muscle on in that period than anything outside of steroids, okay? But then after that 12 days, 14 days, the body starts to normalize to the extra calories, then you'll start to put more fat on. So you have this little window about 10 to 12 days where if you're coming out of starving, the body will repartition the way it allocates the excess calories, and because it thinks that you're coming out of a famine and it wants to basically use those calories to give you the best chance of surviving. So it's going to help you put muscle on. So you can trick the body to some degree, and you can even run in cycles of doing that. But you will put on, even doing that, let's say that you did 12 days, you doubled your calories after coming out of a starvation period. You're going to put on mostly muscle. It's great, but you're also going to put some fat on. You put on a few pounds of fat doing that. That outside of steroids is the most effective thing known. What you find is that in the fitness fantasy ecosystem, there are a lot of people more or less just still doing 70s bodybuilding, advocating muscle as the cure for everything. And what they're not talking about is what they're on. They're not talking about behind the scenes what they're taking. I personally know people who, advocate that, and I know what they're on. Okay. So they're not being truthful about everything they're doing. And what they're doing is setting people up for just by not being truthful, you're really tricking people.
I
Like I
know,
think
it's
that's
misleading. Yeah.
I think that's fine if you're honest about it. And like that's one thing I like about Mark Bell is he's so disclosing, he's so honest.
Yeah.
Mark will tell you, yeah, I'm on steroids. I love steroids. They're great. Here's what I'm on. Fantastic. Love it. Thank you. We need more people like that. But
Yeah.
that's the exception, not the norm. So,
And it's not just the men, it's the women as well. People
Oh,
kind of like I talk to the average Joe in the gym. I have a lot of friends in the gym and they're like jacked and buff, but they're like, I suppose because I'm an open book, they're really open with me and they're like, yeah, yeah, I take this, that, and the other. But I know a lot of the women as well do it. Now, I don't. I've always been fully open because I'm like, well, I just do what Joel tells me to do, and that's why I look the way I look. But it's more prominent than people want to recognize. So
oh
again,
gosh.
the whole
Yeah.
misleading thing is, look, if you're gonna do something, at least do it right. Now, one thing I
Yep.
do want to talk about in the factor of doing it right, again, attribute a huge part of how I look, how I perform. I have IBD and I have
Hmm.
hypothyroid as well, which I didn't tell you. Like, I have really bad diverticulosis, but I like never get flares. And if I get a flare, you know what I do? I take a load of polyphenols.
Yeah.
I think, and it'll bring my inflammation right down. But people are like, your skin is great, your hair is great. And yeah, I do other stuff, but my foundation is always, I focus a lot on polyphenols. And part of that I got from you was at one stage you mentioned, look, if you can flood the body with a lot of polyphenols, you can slow down aging and prevent the rebound weight gain. And I was like, I'm in. That's it. I'm in.
Yeah, so the immune-centric approach, which is sort of my thing, the foundation of it is really the gut, the microbiome. And it's something, for me, like, I mean, this started for me in 2006, and I got to 2013, I had tens of thousands literally of outcomes on the microbiome. There were no one else on the scene doing the gut thing. And then all of a sudden, it got flooded with, people that had been, experts and stuff. But I can just say, having seen, many outcomes, basically, some of these things are much easier than we might think. And it's simply because when you start giving the right substrate to the right bacteria, the metabolites. So, something that's underappreciated is metabolites. Metabolites are things, the products of metabolism, and they act as second messengers.
Kind
And
of
they
like
even act.
endotoxins, right?
Endotoxins, yes, that's sort of it in a sort of negative light,
Yeah.
but there's a positive light. It's called MAMPs and DAMPs. Microbial associated molecular patterns can be influenced by metabolites, and so if you feed the right bacteria the right foods, they make the right metabolites, and those metabolites flood the body with the right messaging signals to do all the things that we would like it to do.
Mhm.
And one of the easy ways to do that is that the phytobacteria as a species has so much power over everything. And it's one of those rare places in the body where it's very difficult to narrow things down because there's everything's so interrelated. But there are a few things, and body fat's one, bifidobacteria is another, and they're related.
Mhm.
So when you give the right food to the taxa, bifidobacteria, the downstream effects of that affect the entire body. The gut junction seal and heal, and by virtue of that, endotoxins stop leaking into the blood, stop inflaming everything, and you get all these downstream effects that are just beneficial. So that is kind of essential to what I do, that whole universe of things.
Yeah, and then well, apart from the byproducts from the bacteria, which would include butyrate, which you speak a lot about, which just made me fall in love with green beans. Green beans are like my top vegetable.
Are they really?
Everyone's like, oh, she's talking about green beans again. I'm like, yeah, I am. Especially with IBD, I
Oh
can't
yeah.
tolerate the cruciferous, even if they're cooked. It doesn't matter if I mash them. I just can't. So green
Hmm.
beans is so like neutral to me. I can eat them until I get sick of them. But and then the what I was saying with the polyphenols, then they've got the kind of free radical scavenging aspect of them as well, further helping with um, inflammation, superoxide dismutase, all of that fun stuff. But as well, and I heard you mention, and correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the kind of fiber-rich, polyphenol-rich diet, it can help with what we would consider fasting mimicking.
Yeah, the way that it does it is through feeding the right bacteria. So the right bacteria will almost one-to-one mimic fasting. And if you just take a step back in a non-scientific way and think about it, it just makes complete sense. So in a sort of imagine the ancestral ecosystem and imagine foraging and feasting. Um, all put anybody in a survival show, and what they'll all repeat the same pattern. They'll all look for food, and what they're looking for is something dense, like protein, like fish or game. But along the way, they forage.
Mhm.
And so there's this incredible synergy in nature between foraging and fasting, such that fasting has an aspect to it that's regenerative through autophagy and through, a number of other mechanisms. And foraging feeds the right bacteria that are 100% in lockstep with the benefits of fasting. So, example is bifidobacteria. It helps you make butyrate. Butyrate's an HDAC inhibitor, same thing that happens, when you're fasting, and activates AMPK, AMPK, and all these other things. So, it stimulates what's called fasting-induced adipose factor, adipocyte factor. And so what you'll see is there's this one-to-one synergy between certain keystone bacteria fed by foraging foods and the benefits of fasting. They're almost identical.
And that's something, Dr. Walter Longo, he is a proponent of fasting and the fasting mimicking diet, and now they have kind of a whole system that they sell. But basically, the system can, nobody's going to like me saying that if they work for that company, but you can basically replicate what they're selling, like the
Oh, yeah.
fasting mimicking diet, by just focusing on polyphenol rich plant foods. That is pretty much what the fasting mimicking diet is. They're just avoiding all the animal meats and animal products. So, yeah.
Well, before there was a fasting mimicking thing by Longo, I was at Quest creating fasting mimicking working on a project to create fasting mimicking foods. And if you break down my book, The Way, before that, the Immunity Code, if you break that down, day one is fasting mimicking, 100%. It's actually better because it's specifically targeted in conjunction with a fast the following day. So it goes way beyond fasting mimicking. So the idea is if you're going to really set your mind to this and think about the best way to do it, what you'd want to do is you'd want to spin up the bacteria that mimic fasting prior to a fast, the same way you do in nature. And then during the fast, you go beyond nature by adding in things like NAC and glycine and different small molecules. And so what you do is you amplify all of the longevity effects of fasting,
Mhm.
and then you have to fast in a very, very short window. You don't have to fast as long. So I would, yeah.
So what do you think then of doing a feast day, then
Mhm.
this more plant-based foraging day, and then a
Mhm.
fast in that kind of cycle?
Well, that's essentially the way. So the way gives you a foraging day, which is fasting mimicking, and then you have a short fast, and then you feast. And
But if you did it feast first, feast,
yeah,
forage, fast.
yeah. That's inevitably part of it. You're kind of always in that, whether you realize it or not. So if you took day two of the way, where you have sort of these feasting foods, then you go into foraging, then you go into fast. That's exactly part of that pattern.
A big part of what I teach is balance, and I can make the argument on every level. Like nutrition should be balanced. God made us omnivores. Why do you think we have all these different teeth? It's not so we're isolated to one food group. Like use your
Right.
common sense. Like that's I think we agree. It's just common sense. Come on.
Well,
But
yeah, go ahead.
I was
Sorry, go
going to
ahead.
say, but now we have extreme left, right, up, down. Nobody knows what they're doing anymore. But I think if we all come back to balance and use your common sense, then that makes it easier. So I wanted to get your opinion on like the idea of balance, but more so the extremeness now out there.
Mm. So a big part of my second book, The Way, is a return to common sense, and a way to get past being super confused by what's out there. One thing you have to realize is that if you go back to about 2014, there was this influx of people who had never, ever, ever done this stuff before, primarily doctors who came into this, who were essentially first timers and did something that probably they shouldn't have done, which is immediately began talking about it and trying to teach it and trying to gain prominence as an influencer. I had 30 years at this before anybody ever heard of me because it takes a long, long time to really know the roadmap. So what happened is in 2014, you had a bunch of people come in. A lot of them were first timers. You know, they were overweight. They went on a diet, and they started preaching one point of view or another. Usually, like it was right around that time that the keto phase took off, and then keto morphed into carnivore. And so now what you have are a lot of people, particularly doctors, who are advocating, kind of that whole thing. They don't have the experience of having done it 20, 30, 40 years to understand the repercussions long term of it. You've already seen some of them walking it back completely, and you've seen several of them regain all the weight. You've seen, so all of that to say is these are the roadside Sherpas who are on a learning curve, and they themselves will, to a person, either completely walk it back, or probably have some health issues down the road, because they just don't know what's in front of them. They haven't done it long enough to do that. So that created a lot of the confusion that's out there as you have well-credentialed people. Now, the problem with that is that there's been an operation performed on the minds of everybody alive over the last 100 years that the net effect of it was to dilute down reliance on common sense and to elevate trust in authority figures to the point of infantilizing the adult mind, so that you find adults, when it comes to listening to advice, acting like little kids don't question their parents. They're just like, I don't know, but my daddy said that and that's what I'm going to do. But you just replace daddy with, said person who's an authority figure. That's not limited to diet. That's everywhere in every field.
Mm.
But in diet, where it's a problem, is you have authority figures saying things that are just total nonsense.
Oh,
But
yeah.
because we have lost our grip on common sense is a sense that's common to all. Because we've lost that, people don't know what to think. It's well, so and so said this, but then so and so said that. And so what you see is this dependence on authority figures What you're really seeing is the infantilized mind, a
Mhm.
mind that has lost what people used to have. Now, if you go back and read stuff from like the 1700s, 1800s, you find this what we call rugged individualism. It's another way of saying that is people would hear things from very smart people and they'd go, well, seems to me, and they would apply it to their own common sense. You don't see
They
that
would
anymore.
form their own educated opinion.
Right. They wouldn't sycophantically hear something, stupid from someone who went to Stanford or, someone who went to Harvard and just go, well, that must, that, like if you just think about it, like here's a common sense way to approach it. I hear something from some well-credentialed someone. The first question I would ask is, well, how long have they been doing this? Because if they haven't been doing it more than 10 or 15 years, I'm going to really take what they're saying with a grain of salt. That's the first question I would ask. The next question I would ask is, does it violate homeostasis? Okay.
Mhm.
Homeostasis, the deception about the body is that it's static, meaning you make a change and then that change sticks. That's fantasy. The truth about the body is that it's a set of variables that are always chasing a dynamic equilibrium. In other words, it's a seesaw that's always seeking to balance itself. Okay. You make a change, and then somewhere along the way, it's seeking to balance itself by some compensatory effect.
Mhm.
So if someone, no matter who, says something, and I just look at it and go, does this violate balance or homeostasis in some way? If the answer is yes, then I know they're full of it. I know they haven't thought it through because you see this with, that's exactly what we're talking about. Weight regain is simply the body seeking homeostasis. You can call it set point, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it's you made a change, you lost all this weight, and now the body is seeking to reestablish what it thinks is homeostasis. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, nowhere is this more prevalent than diet, where you see experts advocating elimination as the way to health. Okay. The problem with that is that elimination by itself is getting away from balance or homeostasis. You're saying imbalance is the way to health. That's absurd.
Mhm.
Imbalance anything long enough, you're not going to get healthy. You're going to get sick. I don't care what it is. Imbalance water for an hour. If you're still alive at the end of that, we'll talk about it.
Mhm.
Imbalance breathing for 2 minutes. If you haven't passed out, we'll talk about it. Okay.
Mhm.
Imbalance anything. It doesn't matter if it's fats, carbohydrates, or protein. You're not going to get health. You're going to get pathology. Now, you can say that to anybody today and go about carbs. They're like, oh, yeah, that's true. I know that. Say that about protein and watch what happens. Oh, how dare you? Oh my gosh, you talked about protein. How dare you? You get the Greta Thunberg thing going?
We know what's going on with
Yeah.
her.
You said protein can and that gets to the what I call the baby talk. Oh, protein is only good. It's only good, bro. Yeah, bro. It's true of fats. Imbalance any macronutrient long enough, you're not going to get health. You're going to get pathology. So, sorry, very long-winded, but
No, it's great because I don't mean to sound like a bitch, but common sense, people. I recently saw a local lady advertising her new program and she's targeting mid-30 women, so mid-30, mid-50. So that prime things are usually messed up at that stage. And it's meat only. It's a meat only diet. And I'm like, are you fucking serious? And I'm like, you know what? You do you because when you mess up all of these women, they're going to come to me for help because what you're preaching tells me you have not got a clue about physiology or biochemistry or biology, that you're just using a pretty face and some really good marketing to fill your program, but you actually don't understand health at all, which like it makes me angry, but then I'm like, well, at least I'm guaranteed clients in the future, which is
yeah.
terrible.
No, it's well, and that's the norm, unfortunately, is that so the variable of time is missing. It's completely missing. It's missing from MDs, PhDs, all the way down the line. They don't. It's the fallacy or the mistake that the body is static
Mhm.
and time doesn't matter. So we can make a change, and then there's some positive result from that. Let's say it was meat only. If I went to eating meat only, I'd probably see mostly benefits up front. But that's because part of that missing roadmap is what happens with time. That's what's missing. there are curves that you could insert over time, and you could like see these curves and how they operate. So it's like, oh wow, there's a benefits phase, then there's a nothing works phase, then there's a negatives phase to the meat only thing. And the really amazing thing is that would be true of anything. Like you could go, forget meat only, I'm gonna just do plants only, nothing else. And
Mhm.
you're gonna see this amazing benefits phase, but then later on you're gonna see all these negatives. And it could be true of fats. Like I'm just going to eat nothing but fats, and up front you'll see all these amazing benefits, but then in the long run, all these negatives. So again, it gets back to the roadmap because you have all these Sherpas at the roadside going, pick me, but they haven't been down the road. They don't know what happens when you get down the road far enough. And when you listen to people who've done this a long, long time, like they say the same things. They're like, yeah, I did plant-based or vegan for 15 years, and it was so great the first 8 years, and then all my teeth fell out. You know, it's the same story with anything. So you can take that, oh, I'm just going to do all meat and it worked amazing. That same thing would work for anything. You could do the same thing. You could just take the same person and you could take two identical twins. One does all meat, one does all plants, and both have incredible results short term. But long
Mhm.
term, because they're not balanced, you're going to see all kinds of problems.
Mhm. The biggest problem, especially in women, then comes the thyroid issue. And once you kind of mess that up, that is a hard road to then go down and fix that. So we're coming up on time now. We've covered a lot. Two last things I want to
Yes.
talk about. Uh,
Yeah.
the, kind of rounding everything up. This is just kind of conversational. The Biggest Loser.
Oh,
I was on the Rock Bottom podcast recently and they wanted to know my story. I actually mentioned your name in it and so maybe they'll contact you. But they asked me, so then what do you think about the Biggest Loser people? And I said, my heart breaks for them because they were misled and
yeah.
now their lives are pretty much ruined. They're in a worse position than they were before because they were lied to.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's part of like everybody that let's call us the awakened that now see the big picture of the roadmap. It's kind of on us to do what we can to awaken people to what the what the real truth of the long-term picture is. I just saw there's a documentary on Netflix of like I think he was the first winner, the Biggest Loser.
Yeah,
He,
yeah, yeah.
he was 450 pounds and he got down to 190, and now he's regained it all plus that, and it's really bad. So if the things we were talking about were known to him at the time, number one, he wouldn't have done the Biggest Loser, and then he would have had a strategy for how to get the weight off and then how to, increase the odds of not regaining it. That's what he would have done, and it would have saved him. What you said something really key when talking about thyroid. Now you got problems you can't fix. That's the truth of a lot of this popular fantasy stuff is that you go down this road, you get some short-term results, and then long-term, you have problems you can't fix. And,
Hmm.
in my coach's course, we actually teach this. Like, okay, ask if they're a first timer. When you find those ones who are multiple trips, 20 trips into the fat loss well, you have to make a decision if you can help them or not, because you may not be able to help them and you don't want to take their money. That's because the problems get so big and so insurmountable that you don't want to give somebody false hope. That's how bad this problem is. From the tantalizing, oh, you have the answers, and maybe it's the Biggest Loser, maybe it's something, but because the roadmap's missing, it's kind of like I think what we said earlier in the convo. You're going to go down this fork in the road that leads you over a cliff, and you can't get back up.
Yeah. And not only is it like it's going to be harder, but at that stage, if someone has dieted 20 times, they've got wear and tear now mentally, and they've lost that self-trust that am I even capable of doing something like this? So that's a challenge too.
Absolutely.
Last question. This is where this is like a little bit of a selfish question for me to add on to my anti-aging stack is in the immunity code you speak about this older man who was able to regenerate his facial structure and muscles
Oh,
by
yes.
just
Yeah.
chewing
Yeah.
a lot. So I like
Yeah.
Joel,
Yeah.
I chew so much I get
Yeah.
cramps in my face.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I'll tell you what. Been doing an experiment lately. So, I do a lot of that. I do a lot of stuff that is mechanobiology to stimulate the structure of the face. And I've been doing this thing called Vivos, which is a palate expander, and my wife did it. It's incredible how it works. But I've had to go off it the last 5 months into a different device to fix some snoring issues. And so I've had to compensate for that. And so I've come through a phase where I could see some of the results of the Vivos, like it's the cheekbones and it's the jaw shrinking down. And so I went to like a mastic gum, chewing it like round the clock, and it's like bam, all this stuff starting to pick back up. It is incredible. You can bodybuild for the face. I mean, it is incredible the results that you can get from chewing. It's amazing.
Yeah. So what was it? How long did this go? He was like in his 70s and he just chewed everything and anything and basically aged backwards. Am I correct?
Uh, Well, correction, this guy did the Vivos. So he did the mouth appliance, and what he did was he went from looking 70 to looking like a movie star. Like you just saw you saw all this pick up and you saw everything. Just it's I have a picture in my book. It's shocking.
Mm.
And if you go online and you just type in Vivos before after, you can see tons of examples of people who have rebuilt the structure of the face, which has a biological benefit because you expand the airway and then you breathe better when you're sleeping. So yeah, but even just chewing, like chewing hard things is missing. We chew soft things. Chewing hard things, it basically it's epigenomic signals in the bone to grow. It's amazing.
Well, it's resistance training basically.
Mhm.
So like I eat a lot of steak, apples. You have to chew green beans a lot.
Green beans are like it's 45 minutes. I'm like, "Ugh."
But all of these people on their like smoothie kicks and this, that, and the other, and like maybe that's not a great idea. And I did try, you see those jazzercisers?
Yeah.
I tried that for a while, but they're very hard to keep clean and it's a game pain in the ass, so I stopped
Well,
doing
and
that.
the problem with that too is because it's not developed by a dentist, you overdevelop the muscles in the front, but if you unless you're bringing it to each side and working each side, you can actually risk injury.
Yeah, and if you have TMJ as well, it can just tighten everything super up, and then you've got headaches and all. But I did try it. I'm sh maybe they'll evolve it in the future.
Yeah.
Well, Joel, this has been fantastic. So, a dream come true, as they say.
Well, thank you. This has been a super fun convo. I really enjoyed it.
So we've got the inflammation, the insulin resistance, the immune system. We touched on collagen, polyphenols, how there's higher likelihood of success if you're first time success. I swear, last thing. Have you heard of the weight loss registry? It's in America. So if you Google it, there was a weight loss registry set up in the 1970s. And the goal, and it's still active today, the goal was to track people who lost a massive amount of weight, like they term it extreme weight loss, and their success. And then they would ask each individual person, like, well, what did you do to help you lose the weight? But more importantly, what did you do to keep the weight off? And what I find really interesting is that in order to qualify or to be considered someone who's lost an extreme amount of weight, you need to have lost 30 pounds or more, which is a lot of weight, but I wouldn't call it extreme. And then to be considered a success story, you need to have kept it off for 4 to 5 years.
Mm,
If you gain it back after the 5 years, you are still considered a success story, though, which is a bit bizarre. So I was thinking I would reach out to them about my story because I'm like, well, I'm like, if that's how you're categorizing it, I am very successful then. But
oh gosh, you got to be in the top 1%.
well,
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
this is it. But something you should look into because it's interesting. A lot of what they give their information on what helped them, but what helped them maintain. Most of them say what helped them maintain the weight was then they implemented some sort of exercise
Yeah.
to keep the weight where it's
Yeah.
supposed to be. But they didn't necessarily exercise to lose the weight, which was really
Yes.
interesting. It was mostly
Yeah.
nutrition.
Yeah. That's something it's been in my fat loss course and now beating the rebound for a long, long time. Which is if you can get the weight off without exercise, that's ideal. And then you add the exercise in the post fat loss period, that's ideal.
Hmm. Okay, so where can people follow you more? Real Joe Green on Instagram.
Yeah, Real Joel Greene on Instagram, also on X. I'm bad at posting on X, but working on that. And then VEEPnutrition.com, V like the TV show, Veep like the TV show, VEEP.
Yeah, I'll
And
put it
yeah,
in description. Yeah, and you
yeah.
have two books, and I highly recommend them. And then the audio version as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's been fun.
Thank you for, well, for actually getting in touch with you at last, because
Yeah, we got it
you've
done.
you've been a huge influence, and I do use all of your stuff with my clients. So at least rest assured, someone out there is listening to you.
Well, thank you. Thanks. That's great. I'm
Well,
glad.
thanks, Joel, for your time. We'll chat
Thank you.
soon.
We will.